Name a decade that produced more dopeness than the 90s. I'll wait. What's up? It's your girl Natasha, CEO of Sofa Expression, and I would just like to welcome you to the very first episode of the 90s Raised Me podcast. Listen, today we are paying homage to the decade that made me and shaped me into the person that I am right now here today, okay? Because I believe that the 90s gave us some of the best music, television, movies, and sports moments. And listen, I know. There was great music in the 70s and the 80s, but listen, hear me out, okay? The 90s music and culture scene really helped to shape culture as we know it today. Like, let's not play. So just to kick things off, I want to just kind of reflect and reminisce and go down memory lane about the things that I loved about the 90s. You ready? And don't forget, chime in, subscribe, hit the like button, share with your friends. Listen, everybody loves the 90s. Let's not play. Even kids today who don't even know what the 90s was, they be trying to get on the 90s train, okay? Because the 90s was just that good. But let me just tell you some of the things that I absolutely loved about the 90s, right? So first of all, Saturday morning cartoons. Do y'all remember those? Listen, that was like one of my highlights when the weekend came. Oh, I couldn't wait to wake up and watch my favorite cartoons. There was Recess. Eventually there was like Pepper Ann. There was Doug. It was this cartoon called The Weekenders. And then like when I was younger, I used to love getting up on Saturday mornings and being able to watch Power Rangers. And listen, don't y'all try to come for me because Power Rangers had us all in the chokehold. We was out here hi-yi kicking and jumping around talking about it's morphin' time, and everybody had a color ranger that they wanted to be. I was partial to the Black Ranger because I like black, but I also thought Zach was cute. But then, Aisha was the homegirl in the yellow. Didn't really care for Kimberly. She just, I don't like pink anyways. Then, you had Tommy and Jason and all of the things, right? And then like you had all the little action figures. It was just a time, right? It was just a whole time. And then not only did I really enjoy Saturday morning cartoons, but I loved the music, okay? And let me tell you, here's another thing that I love that we probably kids don't even know what this is, like a Trapper Keeper, okay? And this Trapper Keeper right here is where I put all the lyrics to all my favorite songs. And listen, I still have it. I don't know why, but clearly it was because I needed to share this with y'all on this podcast, okay? Because listen, it's some funny songs in here too. Like, first of all, look at this. Do you see this? I don't know if you saw it, but it's crazy. I had all of my favorite lyrics in here. Meeting in my bedroom, first of all, should not have been listening to that. Bling Bling, shouldn't have been listening to that either. Big Bad Mama, Foxy Brown and Drew Hill, Cupid, music was my thing. I used to think I was going to be an artist. I swore I was a rapper. We ain't gonna talk about that though. I have some songs in here that I wrote. Crazy. Just when you go back and look at some of the things that you did as a kid, you just have to crack yourself up because it is so funny, right? And Trapper Keepers, every year when school started, I needed a new Trapper Keeper that had the kind of zipped up. You could have your favorite sports teams. You could have your favorite cartoon characters. I know that they still make the folders and stuff, but I don't know. Do they still make Trapper Keepers? Let me know below because I'm so out of touch. I don't have children at this time, so, I don't be all in that. Another thing that I loved about the 90s was collecting basketball cards. Like every time I went to Target, I was looking for the Upper Deck cards. I was just adamant that I was gonna get a Michael Jordan one day, and never did. But I have an entire binder full of basketball cards, and I wound up buying some Michael Jordan cards off of a kid in elementary school. So I have 10 or 11 of those now. I don't know if they worth anything. Michael Jordan, if you ever come across this, hit me up because you need to sign it because then I could actually make some money off of it. What else? Listen, my Walkman, which then turned into my Discman, Could not live without it. I used to stand on the corner waiting for the bus, listen to my favorite songs, well, on my Discman. But like whenever we went on a road trip as a family, definitely had to have the Walkman because like you don't want to hear what they listening to and you don't want to hear everybody talking to you. And like, let me see. I was listening to the original motion picture soundtrack for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Listen, if you don't know, this soundtrack went hard. Y'all can come for me if you want to. I don't care. I enjoy listening to this soundtrack. And then look, now some of y'all probably wondering, girl, why you still have all this stuff? I don't know. I just kept it because like I thought it was funny. And then like these will probably come back in style. Like Gigapets, like this was like a digital pet that you had to feed, walk, play with, make sure he took a bath. Like mine used to die. I can't lie. And then they had like Tamagotchi, which was like, I don't know, some creature. I don't even know what the heck a Tamagotchi is, but they apparently still have them because Amazon sells them for like $20. So I need to go find mine because maybe it's worth some money because it's an original. But yeah, these right here, I'm gonna put some batteries in them one day and see like if I can still play with it. But mine used to always die because, of course, I'm at school, so I can't take care of it. It's probably why my mom would never let me have a pet. Then look, do y'all remember this? Floppy disk. Okay, when I first started with the whole word processing, we had a typewriter, then we had a typewriter with a monitor, then I got a desktop. And y'all remember that dial-up sound? Oh my goodness, dial-up speeds were terrible, right? But we were just being introduced to the internet. Like, it is so crazy how much has changed since that time to now. We saw the whole gambit of the acceleration of technology because it took off in our lifetime, and by our I mean millennials. So if you're not a millennial, you can't relate. This right here, I don't even know what this is, like some type of organizer, and I swear it was like my Palm Pilot because I thought I was doing something. I'd be like, let me check my calendar, let me put my contacts in here, I don't know. It's funny to me now though when I think about like the things that we did and the way that we entertained ourselves during that period of time. It's just funny to me. And then like on top of all of these things, like thinking about the TV shows that I loved growing up, thinking about playing video games. Sega, I was a Sega girl. I didn't have a Nintendo, but my cousin did. So like when I would go over there, I would get to play like Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong. But I did have a Game Boy. I don't know where it is right now, but I do still have it. And let me see what else. I loved me. Oh, it was Dreamcast. It was something else. There was a couple other like video game type things that I had that I really loved. Then I used to have like the Wheel of Fortune game you could play. I had like a Ninja Turtles game I played. It was just Donkey Kong was king, okay? And Sega. So Sonic the Hedgehog was like my favorite, hands down. Oh, NBA Jam. He's on fire. Oh my goodness. Like y'all getting me all in my feels. All in my feels. But then let's talk about TV because like the 90s had amazing television shows, okay? Listen. Living Single, which I was not allowed to watch. Martin, Fresh Prince, Family Matters, Hanging with Mr. Cooper was one of my favorites. TGI Fridays was a thing on ABC. Every Friday you would get ready for your whole lineup. And I mean, I think it also included like Step by Step and maybe Full House. I don't remember. But Friday nights was when you got to watch all your favorite shows, and it was just the time of my life. What I loved about TV in the 90s, especially when we talk about Black representation, is that we had so many amazing shows that represented Black people in a positive light, in a way that many people hadn't seen before. Like if you think about A Different World, which exposed us to HBCUs and college life, and thinking about, hey, I actually can go to college and I can pursue careers as a doctor or an engineer or, a business professional. Like those were things that you had not seen on television, at least when it came to Black families and Black children and Black people. Love that for us. And then when you think about like Living Single, which was the forerunner for Friends, We gonna say it. It's true. But when you think about that show, you had such a diverse array of career paths with those people as well. And then you got to see like a group of friends. You got to see female friends, and yes, they had their problems. They sometimes didn't get along, but at the end of the day, they rode and they rocked for each other. And it just showed you that, we have the capacity to love, because that's something that, people try to act like for many years that Black people just didn't have the capacity for that, that we were like some type of abnormal. And I love the way that, that dynamic played out on screen. And I wrote a whole blog post on Soulful Expression, shameless plug, go check it out, where I'm talking about like the TV shows that really helped to shape the culture. And Living Single is definitely one of those for me, because you got to see a Black woman entrepreneur building her business and struggling in the beginning, but eventually finding success, navigating her way, finding her own path. Then you had my favorite, Maxine Shaw, attorney at law. Honey, she was doing her thing as an attorney. She got into politics and was helping to make changes in her community. You had Overton, who was also an entrepreneur. He was a carpenter. He was passionate about what he did. He did not care if anybody looked down on that. Like, that's what he loved and that's what he did. And he stood 10 toes down in that thing for his carpentry. Then you had my boy Kyle, the part of the dynamic duo of Max and Kyle, my favorite toxic couple of the 90's. But he was a Wall Street bank. I mean, he was a Wall Street investor. He worked on Wall Street. He wore his locks. Like, he was very much into his African pride. Love that for him. Love that for us, to be able to see that on screen and to see that, what, the way that you wear your hair in its natural state is completely professional. Okay. They did a whole episode about it. Loved it. I love the lessons that we got to see. And I mean, Regine was super bougie. And yes, she was chasing the dollar and she was chasing the man, but she also had goals. And, you got to see that she is actually a person who has feelings. I mean, Regine was one of those characters that I love to hate. I'm actually probably going to be her for Halloween this year, Cause I love Regine. You got to love Regine. Okay. She had some of the best moments in that whole show. Like, she was good with the expressions, the wigs. Like, come on, the fashion. That's another thing about the 90's. You got to see an evolution of fashion. You had all types of fashion. You had the baggy tomboy look, which I was one of those. I was, like, Aaliyah was my homegirl. Okay. I was trying to get that whole vibe. Like, my hair used to be longer and I would get it straightened and I would put it over the eye, because I was trying to be Aaliyah, let me tell you. So it's just, I could keep going. But you also had shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which again allows you to see different ways that Black people live, right? Because you had Will Smith coming from more of a quote unquote hood background. He lived in an area that, um, had a few issues, because clearly he got into a fight and that's how he ended up in Bel Air with his aunt and uncle. But then you got to see like a successful attorney, and you got to see the family living in a large home, and you just got to see that we can be successful, but the success can be defined in all kinds of ways, and that's what I loved about the TV shows in the 90's, is that it showed successful Black families at different points of economic success, right? Because like, success is not just about how much money you earn, but it's about the love that you share in your family, the community that you build, and I just loved it. And I feel like sometimes the shows today don't necessarily connect in that way for me. And that's probably why I don't watch a lot of TV. There are just a few shows that I actually really enjoy watching. But the 90's, honey, I could binge watch those shows over and over again. And I was so excited when they all came to HBO, because then I could just not have commercial breaks. Because on Hulu, they be trying to make you watch commercial. Who want to see that? I don't need your ads, okay? I ain't buying it. I'm not subscribing. I'm just here for the 90's vibes, right? And then like, when you think about the 90's movies, we had so many Black movies. It's crazy. And we had all kinds of genres that we were in. I mean, like, Set It Off. I mean, like, that's probably not the best representation of us. But again, another one of those friend dynamics, right? I loved The Wood. That's like one of my favorites. Life, watched that way too many times. That was one of my favorites. Boomerang, which became a spinoff TV series, somewhat of a reboot. And that's another thing about the 90s. That lets you know that the 90s was it, because think about how many things have been remade, rebooted from 90s era television and movies. Why? Because they were dope. Oh my goodness. I completely skipped one of the things I loved most about the 90s, which should have been something that was tied into the basketball cards, because I loved basketball. I was obsessed with basketball. I wanted to be Michael Jordan. I was convinced I would be the first female in the NBA. And then in 96, the WNBA came into existence and kind of shot down all of my hopes and dreams. So I was kind of sad. I really was, because I was convinced that I had what it took to be the first female in the NBA. Probably I didn't, but it was beautiful to dream. And as you can see, I have my Michael Jordan poster here. And I don't know, do kids still put posters on their walls like this? Because I had all the posters. I had, all my favorite music artists, all the men that I probably shouldn't have been looking at, plastered on my wall. Y'all know how we did. Do they still do that? Let me know. I'm so out of touch with reality when it comes to kids these days. I don't know what they be doing. They spend so much time on these devices. And what I think about this generation, our generation, and the generation that was raised in the 90s, is that we are like the perfect median between like old school generations and this newer generation, right? Because we were familiar with all of the old tech, like I had a cassette player, I had a Discman, I had to load CDs in the back of my mom's trunk in order to have music while I was driving. I had, like I said before, I had a typewriter, I had an old school computer with dial-up. My first laptop was like this thick, and that thing was heavy. It was literally a brick. But then we got to see just the rapid transformation of technology in our lifetime. So by the time I went to college, we had smartphones coming out, and being able to do everything in the palm of your hand, and that was revolutionary, right? Like it still baffles me just how much technology has changed. I think about the first cell phone I had, which was a Nokia. Everybody had that. Everybody played Snake. Come on. And then we used to put all the different case covers on there. And then I remember the first time I got an iPhone. I remember when the iPhone first came out and I was like, don't want that. But by the next year, they had me hooked. Ain't that crazy? And I have had an iPhone ever since. I remember when two-ways came out, and like that was a whole thing. Genuine had a whole song about a two-way, like pager. I always wanted a pager. Don't know why, but I was just obsessed with that aesthetic. And like now, when I think about all the devices that we have, the ways that we are able to communicate without ever seeing a person, the fact that, especially during the pandemic, how all of these things began to really accelerate rapidly because we had to find a way to connect with people, that we couldn't see in person. I am just baffled by how quickly technology changed in the span of my lifetime, from 1990 to 1999. If you think about the evolution of the internet in that time period, if you think about the evolution of telephones in that time period, computers, it is just mind-boggling. And I think that by being a child that grew up in that period, we understand what it's like not to have technology, and we also appreciate the importance of having technology, the convenience of having technology. But, we're not necessarily as addicted, I think, as like these kids who are coming out the womb knowing how to work an iPhone. And we understand that sometimes it's okay to unplug, and to put down those devices and to connect, because I think that these generations, we losing that human connection, that human interaction. Like, do kids even go outside and play like that anymore? Like, I remember we used to spend hours outside, and I would be smelling like outside, okay? I made a video about the outdoor smell, because outside is absolutely a smell. And I remember like playing kickball, playing baseball, digging a tunnel through the snow, making food with dirt and leaves and pretending like you had a restaurant. Like all these things like really expanded my imagination. It allowed me to breathe in fresh air, it allowed me to be active. And I just feel like sometimes all of this technology that we have, while I love it, I also sometimes be like, wait, let's dial it back a little bit. Like, I want a little bit of a simpler life some days, because like sometimes I just want to disconnect. Like, I don't need technology to take over my life. I don't like, even when I think about like the cars now and like, the fact that it does assisted driving or you have like the camera, like, why are we so bent on like not having to do anything? Like, I do understand that we want to make our lives simpler, but we don't have to take away everything. But that's a whole different conversation. And I'm not going to go down there because we're really talking about the 90s. And I don't want to get all off in left field because I was going to go there. I can get on a soapbox about that. But I also think that the 90s was really great for Black culture as a whole. When you think about the music, when you think about the movies, when you think about just everything that was the essence of the 90s, Black culture is front and center. You can say what you want, but the facts are the facts. We influence so much, and we still do today. And I think that, when we look at the 90s, if we really stop and think about it, you will develop an appreciation for how much we have added to the overall landscape of American culture. It's undeniable. People can sit up here and pretend like it's not, but like when you think about the way that we wear our hair now, even like cornrows, baby hair, swoops, big jewelry, long fingernails, all these things were things that Black women were doing in the 90s. And now, you have other people from other cultures that are starting to embody that. And now it's no longer seen as a ghetto trend. But, we had to endure those types of labels and that categorization as ghetto, which now it's like mainstream fashion trends. And so I just think that the 90s provided like this great landscape of things that we now draw from. Just like the 80s and the 70s and the 60s provided something similar to our generation. Now I feel like generations now are pulling a lot of things from the 90s. And the thing I have to say, and this might be a bias, but I absolutely believe that the 90s will reign supreme forever. That's it. I'm sorry, because everything gonna stand back to us. And I wasn't born in the 90s, but I was absolutely raised in the 90s. And like, it was such a pivotal time for me. And I sometimes wish I could go back. Like, I love the 90s. And I mean, who doesn't? So I'm so excited to continue the discussion about how the 90s really helped to shape and mold me. And when I think about like how I view relationships, careers, money, all of that, I feel like all of that stems back from the time period that I grew up in. And I can't wait to sit down at the table and discuss all of these things with you guys. So I hope you're going to continue to follow me on this journey. Continue to pull up to the conversation because there is much to talk about. And listen, the 90s raised me, and I know that you love the 90s too. So I know I'll see you again next week. Peace.